Mr. Phillips seems to think that in the past we readjusted our society through presidential elections. Well, this was certainly true when Andrew Jackson was elected, and most terribly true when Lincoln was elected in order to restructure and centralize and, in effect, to militarize the nation. But Mr. Phillips sees more fundamental readjustments in later elections than I do. Admittedly, FDR staved off a revolution by giving us a bare minimum of socialism to go with the minimum of democracy that we have never particularly enjoyed, possibly because it was always minimal. Our current weird version of democracy requires ever more numerous and expensive elections from which all politics have been carefully removed. The elections of 1992 and now of 1994 are simply the mixture as before. And the people are growing noticeably restless. In good times, of course, they don't particularly care who is in office. But in bad times they do, and these are bad times. They have complaints to make. But to whom, other than Rush and company on the radio? The people have no representation within the Beltway, unlike the banks or the insurance companies. Consequently, office holders and their shadow, the media, are equally disliked by a vast majority of the people. Unfortunately, the people at large are without alternatives. That is what makes the situation now so volatile and potentially dangerous. I mean, think what might have happened if Ross Perot had possessed the oily charm of Charlton Heston. When a people come to detest the political system in which it is entrapped, that system will not endure for very long. Mr. Phillips stops short of a constitutional convention, no doubt on the usual ground that they will take away the Bill of Rights, the usual conservative liberal response. More to the point, the other they, the unmentionable they, who actually govern us, will control the convention as they control every aspect of our political life. And so such a convention, if not dangerous, could possibly be a waste of time. I can't disagree, though personally I'd like to see an attempt made so that we might at least get a good look at what's going on under the flat rocks of the Republic. I've always been mystified at how obtuse politicians and media are. Every politician of consequence for the last quarter century has run against Washington, against lobbyists, against insiders, against Jefferson's venal and oppressive ruling class, or to be precise, the representatives of our actual rulers who circle the globe like Puck with all the swift, anonymous speed of a fax laden with campaign money. It is very hard, one would think, to live with so total a contradiction if you were one of these politicians. For instance, Reagan and Carter each campaigned against Washington, and each won. Neither understood why it was people voted for him. Neither made the slightest attempt, even cosmetically, to curb Jefferson's tyrannous and venal capital. The two new employees forgot their own speeches and went right on doing business as before, as they were instructed to do by those huge economic forces that govern Earth. Can someone like Clinton make a change? I don't see how. He would like health care of the sort that every civilized nation has, but we can never have a rational system as long as the insurance companies see to it that no matter what the system, they will benefit. The people may want affordable health care, but they're not going to get it in the United States of America as now constituted. So Mr. Phillips has now come up with an old notion of mine, devolution, the dictionary word for breaking up the Union into smaller and more manageable units. He would move much of the government away from Washington, I suppose just to inconvenience the 70,000 lawyers who will then have to be able to deduct as legitimate travel expenses the weary weekly journey from Montgomery County to sky-topped Denver. He would move various departments permanently to other states and rotate the capital from this city to that city. He would like an amendment to the Constitution setting up a mechanism for holding nationwide referendums to permit the citizenry to supplant Congress and the President in making certain categories of national decisions. He doesn't say what one. I would suggest declarations of war might be put to the people from time to time since they have to fight them. So along with this bit of major surgery of the body politic, he has some useful band-aids, but no more. Anyway, I am well pleased that what I've been proposing for so long in places like the nation and here has now gone mainline. So let me go a bit further out. In 1922, I switched on CNN and heard Jerry Brown in New Hampshire giving word for word a speech that I gave here on how to restore power to its only legitimate source, we the people. As Jerry and I had not spoken since I ran against him in the California Senate primary of 1982, I was pleasantly surprised and I praised him for his wisdom. I blessed him for his plagiarism, no matter how belated, and he rang me in Italy. Yes, it was my speech. Did I have anything more? If only Joe Biden had been so statesmanlike. And when I come to New Hampshire, I said, yes, I had more speeches, but no, I would forego the winter wonderland of New Hampshire, sometimes known as Dole Land, and for me a wasteland ever since the translation of William Loeb to a higher hunting ground. However, thanks to CNN and the fax machine, I could monitor his campaign. I could send my thoughts immediately. So a number of suggestions of mine entered the primary campaign. The principal notion was conversion from war to peace. I said, find a defense plant that's closing and say that it should be kept open and converted to peacetime using the same workforce and technology. Brown did just that in Connecticut. He told the soon-to-be-dismissed makers of Seawolf submarines that if he were president, they would be making bullet trains. 5 in the morning, I got a call from Pat Cadell. We won Connecticut. Then they made the mistake of going to New York, and that was the end of that campaign. Meanwhile, Perot grabbed my We the People as the strange device for his eccentric banner. So I felt very odd watching CNN in Italy, and here were my words coming back to me from all different directions, slightly garbled. I felt like a playwright with 3 losing plays on the road. As Jerry was headed for Pennsylvania after New York, and as the game was up for him, I said, why not propose something really useful? Do it in front of Liberty Hall, I thought, and dramatize it. Launch a new idea that may take a few years to penetrate, but when it does, it might save us all. Now here's the gist of what I wrote him. I started with the eternal problem of what to do about income tax. As the people at large get nothing back from the money that they give the government, Bush was kind enough to give us a light show in the Gulf. That was the only time we saw that $4 trillion, you know. It was a lovely show. But that's not enough. Why not just eliminate the federal income tax? How? Well, eliminate Washington, D.C. Allow the states and municipalities to keep what revenues they can raise. I know that tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lobbyist lawyers and hired media gurus will find a million objections, but let's pursue the notion. Why not divide the country into several reasonably homogeneous regions, more or less on the Swiss cantonal system? Each region would tax its citizens and then provide the services those citizens wanted, particularly education and health. Washington would then become a ceremonial capital with certain functions. We should always need some sort of modest defense system, a common currency, and a Supreme Court to adjudicate between the regions, as well as to maintain the Bill of Rights, something the present court is reluctant to do. How to pay for what's left of Washington? Each region will make its own treaty with the central government and send it what it feels that it can afford to spend on painting the White House, on our common defense, which will, for lack of money, cease to be what it is now. All-out offense on everyone on earth. The result will be no money to waste, either on pork or on those imperial pretensions which have left us $4 trillion in debt. Wasteful, venal, tyrannous Washington will be no more than a federal theme park to be administered by Michael Eisner. Will the regions be corrupt, venal, etc.? Of course they will. We are Americans. But they will be corrupt on an infinitesimal scale. Also, more to the point, in a smaller polity, everyone knows who's up to no good, and they can police themselves better than the federal government ever could, even if it had ever wanted to. All over the world today, centrifugal forces are at work. In a bloody way in the old Yugoslavia and parts of the old Soviet Union, and in a peaceful way in the old Czechoslovakia. Since history is nothing but the story of the migration of tribes, we must now note that the tribes are very much on the move again. And thanks to modern technology, we can see Bengals and Indians overflowing each other's borders. Racially, the composition of Europe has changed more in the last 50 years than it had in the 500 years precedent. Whether or not this is good or bad is irrelevant. It is. Now here at home, people fret about invasions from the Hispanic world, from Haiti, boat people from Asia. But, like it or not, we are changing from a white Protestant country governed by males to a mixed polity. And in this time of change, there's bound to be conflict. Nation-states will more and more try to shut their borders as national identities will more and more blur. The fragmentations we see everywhere are the result of a dislike which is suddenly spontaneous all around the world. For the nation-state as we have known it since its first invention by Bismarck in Europe and by Lincoln here. People want to be rid of arbitrary capitals and far-away rulers. So let the people go. If our southern tier is to be Spanish and Catholic, let it be. But also simultaneously, as we see in Europe, while this centrifugal force is at work, a rushing away from the center, there is also a centripetal one, a coming together of small polities in order to have better trade, defense, even culture. So we're now almost back, if by chance, to our original Articles of Confederation, a group of loosely confederated states rather than a united state, which has proved to be every bit as unwieldy and ultimately tyrannous as Jefferson predicted. After all, to make so many of the many into one, you must use force. And this is a bad thing, as we experienced certainly in the Civil War. So let us make new arrangements to conform with new realities. I will not go so far as to say that we shall ever see anything like democracy at work in our section of North America. Traditionally, we have always been a republic entirely governed by money. But at least within the regions, there will be more diversity than there is now, and best of all, the people at last will have the sensation that they are no longer victims of a far-off government, but that they and their tax money are home at last. At my present rate of transmission, when I speak in this room, these remarks will not become public until the first decade of the next century. I just hope they won't come too late, and meanwhile, let's have a nice 21st century.